In an era when we have governments moving mad, skirting the edges of authoritarianism, where they believe they can act whichever way they want without the populace rising in any sort of revolt or taking any action, political apathy, which I'm not looking at from the absolute definition of what it is, by the way, is something that we absolutely cannot afford to let thrive. Because when your society is on the precipice of destruction, making an active choice to learn, to study about society, politics, and governance, or to be inspired by people, fictional or otherwise, who decide to become active participants in their world and how they are governed or ruled, is the only course of action to take. Which is why the last prompt for the Fuckathon is fuck political apathy. If you're new here and are curious what on earth the Fuckathon is, no, we're not talking debauchery. The Fuckathon is a month-long readathon or reading challenge that runs from July 1st all the way to the 31st, where we read books that are centered on pertinent issues affecting us as a people so that we can be better educated on these issues and have the knowledge we need to take necessary actions. This year's Fuckathon kicks off next week, and if you need to know what the prompts are, I will leave the link to the announcement video in the description bar. Now, every year I put together a 20 book recommendations list per prompt so people can have an idea of the wide swath of book options that they can either pick from or use as a starting point to create their own reading list. If you want to see the recommendations for the other prompts, do check out my Fuckathon playlist. For the fuck political apathy, the recommendation list is segmented broadly between books with regards governance of countries that exist today, fictional stories about politicking and governance and coming together to build a government, and finally, the last set of books tackle the why of political apathy, its different phases, and what our focus should be with regards self-governance. It's a pretty well-rounded list, if I do say so myself. And with all that said and done, let's get started on the recommendations for fuck political apathy. We'll start with the first book on the list, Political Party Financing and Electoral Politics in Nigeria's Fourth Republic by Babayo Sule. What? Did you think I was going to start with any other country but my own? Of course not. Not when Nigeria as a country perfectly represents what happens when financial interests and gains have soured a populace from any expectations of good governance. Political party financing and electoral politics in Nigeria's Fourth Republic gives us quite the detailed analysis of the process of political financing in Nigeria from 1999, which was when our then military overlord, General Sani, I hope he continues to rot Abacha, kicked the bucket and we were finally able to return to democratic rule. But did we though? Nigeria's democracy as a country has always been rooted and steeped in corruption. And for you to understand how full-scale it is and why Nigerians are quick to congratulate any one of the masses who makes it into the hollowed halls of politics, because the belief is that they are there to steal as much money as they can find, and often they do, this book points us in the right direction by highlighting the why of it. And the why often starts with political party financing, which is the process of funding the parties and the candidates that contest under their platform, a form of lobbying, if you will. But instead of the beneficiary of the funding merely passing on laws and policies that serve the interests of the financier, which is what happens in a lot of other countries, the donors in Nigeria also insist on getting their monies back. Which then means that we have actors in our governance who not only steer the country in the direction they want because of their financial might, but they are also robbing the country blind as well. It is infuriating. Now, political party financing and electoral politics in Nigeria's Fourth Republic is quite a pricey book, like very pricey. But if you do want to study more about governance and elections in Nigeria, particularly the 2015 general elections, which is considered the most corrupt in the history of the country with an expenditure that ran into billions of dollars, then might I suggest trying to see if your local library has a copy or something. But if you can't get access to it and instead are more interested in American politics and the party system, especially with how dysfunctional it's become in recent years, then might I turn your attention to the second book on the list, The Hollow Parties, The Many Past and Disordered Present of American Party Politics by Daniel Schlossman and Sam Rosenfeld. In their book, Daniel and Sam point out that a healthy democracy requires political parties that are rooted in the daily civic lives and concerns of the local communities. And it is the act of ignoring these core tenets of what they exist for that has sunk both the Democratic Party and Republican Party into what they currently are. And to show that they are very aware of what this party should be, Daniel Schlossman and Sam Rosenfeld take the reader on a historical journey of American political parties from the Jacksonian era all the way through Barack Obama and Donald Trump, and how the party's present operations reach back to the founding of the country. It is a study of prominent figures like Martin Van Buren and Abraham Lincoln set against a backdrop of a political system that has become so driven by power and greed that the very people they are meant to serve don't matter anymore. I'm sure it's already pretty clear, but I just want to reiterate that Daniel Schlossman and Sam Rosenfeld do make it obvious that they are not partisan in any way. They speak about both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in equal measure and explore how both parties have become dysfunctional over the years, so their readers can have a more comprehensive understanding of the state of things. If you want to take active interest in politics and the political landscape of the United States, it's always a good idea to study what has come before to better understand why the system exists as it does today. You should know these things about whatever country you reside in, which is why the next book on the list moves from America and takes us to Britain. I am of course referring to Political Recruitment, Gender, Race and Class in the British Parliament by Pippa Norris and Joni Lewandowski, which is a book that covers 25 years worth of full accounting of legislative recruitment in Britain. If you're someone who's always been curious about why the British legislature is not as representative of the body of people over which they govern and who bear the brunt of the laws they pass and the policies they enact, then this might be the book to pick up. Pippa Norris and Joni Lewandowski pulled their evidence from surveys and detailed personal interviews of parliamentary candidates, members of parliament and party selectors, and explores the valid question of who gets to become a politician, who gets to represent the people. Can those of us who want to take things a step further in not just voting and campaigning, but who want to become active members of government, moving from being activists and local councillors to a career in parliament, for example, stand a chance at all? What is behind the minuscule representation of working class people, women and black folks in the British Parliament? If these are questions you want to see answered or have recently started considering, then maybe pick this one up. If, however, you've always been curious about the certain marketing bent to politics that things have become of late, come on, I can't be the only one who sees that everything seems to have become a case of how can I sell my party in a way that appeals to my audience? Political parties and their policies and what they are meant to stand for have become more like brands that they are trying to sell to their constituents. If you're curious about that, especially how it applies to Canadian politics, then consider checking out Shopping for Votes, How Politicians Choose Us and We Choose Them by Susan Delacourt, where she takes us into the political backrooms of Canadian politics, where we see politicians planning their next sales marketing pitch in the name of policies. I know you just went, huh? Shouldn't the reverse be the case? But no, that is how politics have become. It isn't a public service anymore. Instead, it's become more of a business, and the citizens and constituents are the customers who the marketers, politicians, have to convince amidst a rise of voter apathy and public policies that have been gutted so much that they are barely recognizable. And they do all of this by appealing to different audiences, managing media, divvying up the country into niche markets and targets, and rather than approach politicking from a standpoint of national growth and unity and vision, it's all about making the sales pitch with barely any substance or promise that can be held onto. Marketers are way too slick after all, and that is what Canadian politicians have become. Which is why a large percentage of the voter base have checked out, and we keep seeing a reduced number of voters show up at the ballot box every election period. If you want to examine this history of Canadian politicking from the 1950s to present day, then you should definitely pick this up. But books about politics can sometimes be very confusing. The lingo is often very eyebrow and some would say elitist. But to get a populace to be more active in politicking, there's a need to distill this information in a way that is easy to grasp, which is what the next book on the list aims to do. Australian Politics for Dummies by Nick Economal and Zari Gazarian. I'm a firm believer in there's nothing wrong in admitting that you aren't the smartest person in the room and that there's more for you to learn about a subject. The For Dummies book series have always been about that, simplifying concepts so a larger audience can better understand them. And in this case, Nick and Zari put together a book that helps people better understand the Australian political system, from election and proportional voting in the Senate to political parties and systems that had Westminster combined with Washington to produce Washminster, to policies and the 1975 Australian constitutional crisis, to parliamentary roles, government funding and which level of government controls what, and how a balance of power is achieved in the Australian government. If you're Australian or interested in Australian politics and how it functions, then this book might be what you should reach for. if anything, because of its effective simplicity. Now, a lot of the books I've mentioned so far have been written by political analysts and pundits, but what if you want to hear about elections and politics from someone who had a ringside view to this? Like, say, the Chief Election Commissioner, whose responsibility it is to supervise elections. Well, if you're interested in that perspective, then you might want to check out Navin Chawla's Every Vote Counts, the story of India's elections, where he gives us a close-up view into the 2009 general elections as well as elections in certain states in India. We get to understand how elections work, what goes into conducting them, especially an election conducted in a country with one of the world's largest populations. We get a driver's seat view into what challenges the Election Commission face, especially as they set out to conduct a free and fair election, especially when a large part of those in government are just as quick to break the law, which is an experience a large number of us can relate to. It is an informative book that looks at how tensions are handled across different regions, especially if these elections are happening in a country as big, with as diverse a range of ethnicities and peoples as it's present in a multicultural country like India. The one thing that a lot of marketing folks say about Nigeria is that our system is quite similar to what exists in India, and thinking about this book makes it quite the apt comparison. But yeah, if you want to know how the electoral machinery works in its messy, gigantic scope and glory with India as a reference point, then maybe look to Every Vote Counts as a book you might want to consider reading. Like I said earlier, you can just as easily pick up a book that centers policies and politicking in your country, so you can be more knowledgeable about the structures of governance that have been put in place and that directly affect you. But if you instead want recommendations that are more fictional in nature, well, this segment of this video is for you. Starting with a book that follows a character who returns to his own planet in order to challenge the systems of governance and how his people have lived, all for the end goal of reuniting them with the anarchist utopia that broke away from them. If you're a fan of science fiction history, then you already know what book I'm talking about. I am, of course, referring to The Dispossessed and Ambiguous Utopia by Ursula K. Le Guin. Ursula Le Guin is known for her politics and her criticisms of state power, her rejection of capitalism and capitalist interests, and her fascination with alternatives to the political system as we know it today, which is what birthed the idea of the anarchist utopia of Anares, which our lead character, the brilliant physicist Shevek, aims to unite with the mother planet of Uras. The Dispossessed is a criticism of government and the suffering they cause when they do not seek to maintain the interests of the people, and if you haven't read it yet, then this might just be the nudge you need to do so. Or maybe you want a book whose resistance is slow and simmering and cunning, with a lead character that strategizes and plans how she absolutely decimates an empire that came to conquer our home and led to the death of our father and the destruction of our people. I'm of course referring to the one, the only, the Traitor Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. If you want a character that is plotting from the very first couple of pages, then this is the book for you. If you want to see how an accountant can use her love and aptitude with numbers to bring an empire to his knees, then this is the book for you. If you want to read a book that challenges colonialism and the erasure of the native people of these colonized regions with an enforcement of the invaders' values and governments and systems, then this is the book for you. If you love to read and watch a master manipulator at work then by the gods, pick up The Traitor Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. It is multifaceted, it is layered, it speaks to another form of resistance, it tells the story of a girl's struggle to liberate our people and bring justice to our oppressed heritage. It is brilliant. Oh, and it is a very, very queer book. Baru is a lesbian who was raised by two dads and a mother, Antine, who the Duchess she's attracted to. Damn. Check it out if you haven't yet. Now, the previous recommendation tells the story of how an accountant works to destroy a conquering corrupt empire. The next book on the list places that honor and responsibility on a storyteller. Curious about what book I'm referring to? It's simple, really. It's A Conspiracy of Truths by Alexandra Rowland, which introduces us to Chant, a storyteller who wanders the region and is unfortunately arrested as both a witch and a spy. It's a double whammy that all but guarantees that he would most certainly be killed, unless it tells a good enough story that would stay the executioner's hand, and by the gods, Chant does just that. Except that in staying his execution, he unfortunately also catches the attention of the 5 elected rulers of the country, who then basically turn him into this pawn, this piece to be moved along the board in their very corrupt, absolutely messy game of politics. Chant, though, catches on pretty quickly, and when he realizes that he must play an active role in the whole fiasco, he proceeds to do just that, using the very weapon he has at his disposal. He sets out to overthrow the government using stories. It is brilliant. Chant is as morally grey as they come, but by the gods, you you would absolutely find yourself rooting for him. Then there's the 10th book on the list, A Half-Built Garden by Ruthana Emery's, which takes the more science fiction turn and gives us an alien race visiting Earth ready to save humanity by taking us away from our ecologically ravaged planet and join them in the stars willingly or by force. And as we know to happen in these books, different factions want different things. The watershed networks aren't willing to give up Earth. They've started the difficult task of healing the planet by creating a democratic system where they encourage all of Earth's inhabitants, and by all, I mean all, including the trees, the soil, bacteria, the rivers. All of Earth's inhabitants work together, align on interests by voting in order to make our world viable and livable. And this included exiling the corporations whose thirst for profits and power have been ruining the planet. But now with the aliens' arrival, corporations and nation states and the networks all are vying to be representatives of humanity to the aliens, because one thing is quite clear: if any of them take up the aliens' offer, Earth might be lost forever. The onus therefore lies on our lead character Judy, who is the one to make first contact with the aliens to help bridge an interspecies gap. It is a fascinating book and a great pick if science fiction is more your jam. If, however, you're someone who likes your science fiction mixed with a bit of police procedural, then maybe look at The Prefect by Alistair Reynolds, which is the first book in the Prefect Dreyfus Emergency. The book follows Tom Dreyfus, who is a prefect, i.e. a policeman, who lives in the Glitter Band, a group of 10,000 space habitats that orbit the planet Yellowstone with a population of over 100 million humans. It is this multifaceted utopian society that Tom considers home, and that is his beat. So when an attack on one of the Glitter Band habitants looks like an open and shut case, Tom is initially okay with that until he decides to look further, and that's when he discovers quite the lengths to which powerful people would go to keep their secret secret. Now you're probably wondering how this is in any way connected to the prompt. Well, it's because although each of the 10,000 habitats of the Glitter Band represent a different form of society, they all have a common right, which is to vote. Their actions are decided by a giant computer network that runs polls every day, and because most inhabitants of the Glitter Bands have computer routines built into their brains to help them participate in the thousands of polls that they have to vote in every day, they therefore keep their more conscious voting efforts to only the most important polls. So you can only imagine how that plays out, especially if there is something or someone who is able to hack or make certain tweaks to the system. It is quite representative of our everyday living and existence, with how a lot of people work on autopilot when it comes to these myriads of decisions that are made on our behalf on small, tiny scales. If The Prefect sounds like your jam, then add it to your list. Or you can turn your attention towards a more fantastical story. Now, heads up, this is the third book in a trilogy, so this only applies if you've already started the series and needed an impetus to get you to read it. I'm of course referring to The Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch, which is the third book in the Gentleman Bastard series. Now, I'm not going to go into details because of spoilers, but things have gone spectacularly wrong for Locke and Jean, and now they are navigating how to get Locke out of the bad spot he's currently in. Our guy is dying after all. The stage is set for gameplay and manipulation galore, with just that smidgen of a dangerous romance set against the major political elections, which is why this book is on the list. So if you've been meaning to read The Republic of Thieves, she is a thick one, but you can pick her up to fulfill this particular prompt. Or if reading the third book in a trilogy is too much, then maybe look at the second book in a trilogy. I'm sorry, but really, The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson does fit the prompt well. Even if it is the second book in the Mistborn saga, I'm not going to go into details on this either because spoilers, but if you're curious about what goes into rebuilding a new world after the old one has basically shattered due to the defeat of the brutal ruler that held it in his grasp, then this is the book for you. After all, rebuilding is just as important a part of actively participating in governance. If, however, you rather choose a manga or a Japanese light novel, and if you're someone with an interest in video games, then maybe consider Log Horizon by Mamare Tono, which is best described as being a book about politics set within a role-playing game world, with our lead character Shiroi, who alongside 30,000 players of his favorite role-playing game, Elder Tale, finds himself stuck in the world of the game and unable to leave or log out. So what's a brilliant nerd like Shiroi to do? Easy. It decides to build a civilization right there, with conferences to align on domestic and foreign policies. Log Horizon is a fantastic story if you're interested in reading about a character build a system of government from the ground up. If, however, you would prefer that things be even more fantastical, then I have to plug in one of my absolute favorite light novels and stories of all time. I am of course referring to That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime by Fuse. Please note that I said light novels, not manga, because although the manga does have Rimuru already in the stage of building his country. We get further along in the light novels. Now, for those who don't watch my anime content and so have no idea what That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, also known as Tense's Slime or Tensura, is about, we follow a 40-something-year-old construction overseer, Satoru Mikami, who is stabbed whilst trying to protect his subordinate, and upon dying is reincarnated and reborn into another world as a, you guessed it, slime. And in this new world, Satoru, now christened Rimuru Tempest by the storm dragon Veldora Tempest, sets about building his country complete with infrastructure and levels of government that is just a marvel to see happen on stage and eventually screen. Tempest might have Rimuru as the head, but they do operate a more democratic system of government, and in the light novels, Rimuru hires a group of demonesses who take up core positions in the country. I'm not going to go into details because I don't want to spoil things, but Tense's Slime is that book and is just a great fit for the prompt, as it shows these hobgoblins, eye orcs, lizard men, oni, demons and demon lords take active pride in how their country functions and the roles they can play in it. Just in case you couldn't tell, I love this story. Now, let's move back to the non-fiction side of things with The Origins of Political Order from Prehuman Times to the French Revolutions by Francis Fukuyama, which is a bit of comparative historical research that covers several regions, China and India, Papua New Guinea, and as well as Western and Eastern Europe, and how the political order has built and shifted over the ages, with the aim to understand why modern state building and the building of institutions in countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Haiti, Timor-Leste, Sierra Leone and Liberia have failed to live up to expectations. It is a book where the author tries to understand why attempts at shaping countries outside of the West into Western-type democracies have failed. Spoiler alert is because countries are varied and different in their geographies and peoples, and thus have to create a system that works for them on an individual basis and level. If this is a book that appeals or speaks to you in any way, then consider picking it up. And when you're done, you can look at the second book, because it is a two-parter, with the second book aptly named Political Order and Political Decay, from the Industrial Revolution to the Globalization of Democracy. If, however, you want a book that deals with more practical suggestions on how we can all collectively come together to help repair our countries and world, then look no further than Solving Public Problems, a practical guide to fix our government and change our world, where Beth Novak paints a picture of our failing public institutions and the huge number of entrepreneurs who are doing extraordinary things within that space, and suggests how we close the gap by rethinking what the role of a public servant is and bringing to bear the skills of the public workforce. Being a more active participant in governance goes beyond just placing a vote or campaigning for public office. Beth Novak offers us a possible role we can all collectively play as students, community members and leaders, public servants, activists and entrepreneurs to help build our communities and, by extension, our world. We can't solve our problems by doing what we've so far been doing and failing at. Beth Novak encourages us to think of different, more modern solutions to our present situation, and she might just be right. Community is the way to go. It's the way to build. It's the way to get involved. Now, the next book on the list is one that everyone who is interested in political reforms and state and self-governance should either have read or have plans to read sometime in their lifetime, especially when you consider the fact that it is public domain, so we can all access it for free. I am, of course, referring to The Social Contract by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who asserts that the people collectively are the ones with the right to legislate, thus theorizing the best possible way to establish authority legitimately within a political context, which is for it to be compatible with individual freedom that is consented to. Then and only then do we have a social contract. If it's reading you've always had plans to eventually get around to, hey, maybe now is the time to consider it, or at least add it to your TBR so you can get to it at some point in your lifetime. If, however, you want a book that is a bit on the depressive side, that highlights how politicians, whether they are dictators or exist within a democracy, all engage in a self-interested behavior to help themselves stay in power by pleasing a core inner circle of power brokers who are the ones who secure their seat, not the people like Rousseau in An Idealistic World once. When that information fully sinks in, it would become so much clearer why our politicians today like to move with impunity. Is because they simply do not care. The system as it exists today is one where the masses and what we want are not a factor in who retains or keeps power, and that is what is explored in The Dictator's Handbook, Why Bad Behavior is Almost Always Good Politics by Bruce Bueno de Mesquita and Alastair Smith. Now, I'm sure you're very curious about why on earth I would put a book like this on a prompt that is for fuck political apathy. Well, it's because we need to know how the system works right now, how it's fixed to be against us and our collective interests. So when we watch political leaders have their grand speeches, we learn to question their motives. Always. The masses are used to give a semblance of legitimacy to a system that is rigged against us from the very start, and that's what we need to fight and oppose and work towards upending. It's also why a lot of people feel apathetic as far as politics are concerned, and honestly, I can see why. It's why the last book on the list is The Two Faces of Political Apathy by Tom DeLuca, which is a study on the reason behind Roy Teixeira's theory of the disappearing American voter. By examining the steady decline in voter turnout in the United States since the 1960s, Tom DeLuca examines what apathy truly is, an emotional response or condition that is often born as a result of other factors that condition the decision. As far as Tom DeLuca is concerned, political apathy wears two faces. We have apathy as an individual choice and apathy as a function of broader forces, structures, institutions, or elite manipulation over which an individual has little or no control and perhaps even knowledge. Because when you disenfranchise a people so thoroughly, expecting them to be active participants in their own governance is somewhat of a stretch, as they have been conditioned to not care because their voices don't matter and are never heard. I think having this book be the last one on this list is important because I know that as much as I yell and insist that people need to be more politically active, and I say fuck political apathy, I realize that there's a need to be fully aware of the types of political apathy that exist and be aware of the ones that can be directly tackled by the individual, i.e. individual apathy, and not the structural one, which goes quite deep and is often tied to what was highlighted in the penultimate book recommendation. But yeah, those are 20 books for the fuck political apathy prompt, and this officially brings us to the end of this year's recommendations videos, which have been a lot, if I'm being honest. But I hope they have all been helpful, and I do hope that you all will be joining me come July 1st for the Fuckathon. As promised, I will start putting together the hour-long weekend sprint so we can read together and chat about how the Fuckathon is coming along so far for us, and a way to hold one another accountable to keep reading, so do keep that in mind. But yeah, if you stayed this long, thank you. Do consider liking this video if I brought to your attention a book you might just be interested in checking out, whether during the Fuckathon or after it is done. Subscribe if you want to. Share this video if you believe others would benefit from it. Check out my other videos, especially the Fuckathon ones, as it does help grow my channel and is incredibly supportive of my content. Speaking of support, a huge thank you to my Patreon. You all keep me going, and I totally would not have made it this far without you. Thank you. If you'd like to support me on Patreon as well, the link is in the description box. I make new videos 3 times a week. Mondays are for my anime manga content, Wednesdays are for movies and TV shows, Fridays are for anything I want really. All my videos drop at 5 p.m. EST. Whilst you wait for new content from me, do consider checking out my Fuck Billionaires recommendations video if you haven't seen it yet. Until my next video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.